You were talking about the problem with big data, that it was consuming, like these server farms are consuming a massive amount of electricity, emitting heat, using fossil fuels to power them. So one of your concepts was to genetically engineer bacteria, again, I think, to grow server space, like actually storage.
So there's a whole series of ways of skinning that cat. One is certainly to use biology, because the amount of data that cells hold is astronomical, even compared to a computer chip. So when you think about DNA, it's a trillionth of an inch in each of your cells of DNA, but that contains your entire human genome. And so if you stretch that DNA into a line, it would be about 6 feet of DNA folded into a trillionth of an inch. And so you've got 6.4 billion base pairs sitting in each cell. And so each cell can store enormous amounts of information, and you can reproduce that information. So I think there's going to be a race between using quantum computing, which allows you to massively scale Moore's law, and biological storage, reproduction of information. I think a whole bunch of problems that you need to solve through things like blockchain. You're going to run out of energy and server space to keep mining. So eventually you're going to have to go a biological route or a quantum route. Quantum's interesting because quantum could begin to break down the keys for Bitcoins.
You described it as a race between the two? Is it an either or?
No, I think
it just sounds like physically, like server farms are limiting in a physical world.
Yeah.
But if you're able to program in smaller and smaller quantities, if we ever got to the DNA level, then it seems like capacity would be infinite at that point.
Well, we've already gotten to that stage, right? We can begin to write whole genomes. We can begin to insert poems or books or mathematical equations into genomes. We can use evolution to begin to solve equations through, the 1,000 monkeys at a typewriter approach, except that here it's 1 trillion monkeys at a typewriter approach. So you can triage solutions to mathematical equations in very interesting ways. I still think this century is going to be the century of biology. And I think we're going to, if the 17th century was the century of chemicals, and the 18th century started the age of machines, and then the 19th and 20th centuries were the age of industrialization, manufacturing, and the 20th century at the end became digital. This I think is the century of biology.
And so what does that look like? Like, I guess that's what I mean, is like there's still functional factories at a time where much of the economy has been taken over by digital. Digital remains, but biology becomes another.
Well, there are functional factories, for example. But I mean, if you take the thing that humans have done that has most altered the planet is agriculture. So when you look at the extent of cattle and food and feed and textiles, that's what covers most enormous swaths, right? And a lot of that can be substituted by much smaller factories based on cells that occupy 100-fold less land. So you could rewild big chunks of the Amazon, producing the same types of oils and feeds that you're doing when you take out big chunks to put in soybean fields, or you take out big chunks to put in corn or wheat or cotton. right? All of that becomes miniaturized and structured in bacterial factories that occupy 1/100th the space. And that would be a very good thing for humanity to do.
It would make the air cleaner.
Well, and it'll, help us address warming. It'll help us address oxygen. It'll help us address, just sheer heat. It would be a very good thing for this world to take half of the surface of Earth and allow it to get wild again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the reason why it's so wonderful to go to Maine, which used to be a lot of it clear cut, right? And you see what happens when you allow things to come back. A lot of Europe didn't have the forest it has today. A lot of the US didn't have, we've been very good about creating these little municipal parks and these state parks and these national parks. And that's a really good thing for us. It's a really good thing for our kids, and it's a really good thing for the world.